3PNR with Adam R. This episode of 3PNR is featured on the UnX Network. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R., and with me on this episode is Robert Spearing of MUFON. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Adam.
Good. Bob or Rob? You want to go on the short? Bob or Rob?
Rob's good, Rob.
All right, perfect. All right, well, let's start with what got you on the path of ufology?
Well, it goes way back. I was born in 1959 when we had the blackout of November 1965. I remember that night because all we had were my baptism candles to light the house. My father was ill-prepared for a major blackout. The next day, his brother, my uncle, came over, all excited, saying they believed that UFOs caused the blackout that took out the entire northeastern United States and half of Quebec. And that was the first time I was ever exposed to UFOs. I started buying the UFO comic books, the Gold Key comic books after that. In fifth grade, my uncle bought me Chariots of the Gods when it came out around 1970, and I was off to the races. So I had an interest in UFOs probably since I was 6 years old. In 1985, I had one of two UFO sightings, rather mundane. I was never abducted, anything like that. But I was camping in a very remote part of New Jersey, called Round Valley Reservoir. It was a man-made valley that they filled in, and it's an interesting place because there's a lot of paranormal activity there. And one night I was sitting on the beach late at night. It was raining. I was in my poncho with a friend, sitting on an overturned canoe, low cloud cover cutting off the tops of these 2,000-foot tall mountains. And we see a pink light coming across the lake. And we sat there for about 10 minutes and we realized it was getting closer, but very slowly. And it was so quiet there that you could hear a pin drop. And after watching this thing for about 15 minutes, it suddenly began doing the most insane maneuvers over this lake that I have ever seen. It was like making upside down question marks, stopping and starting on a dime. And then at the end of these maneuvers, it shut off so fast that it left a streak across the sky. I went back years later and tried to calculate the horizon, which was about 8 miles. So if it did half the horizon in a second, it was 4 miles, it left at a speed of something like 17,000 miles per hour. So that was an orb sighting. And I didn't know anything about orbs until 2014. A PA MUFON investigator wrote a book about orange orbs, Terry Ray. And I went, oh my God, other people have seen these things. And I joined MUFON immediately. I was a New Jersey field investigator. Now I'm a Pennsylvania field investigator. And I worked my way up through the ranks at MUFON. And now I'm director of investigations on the international side. I was also the head of their short-lived special assignment team, which was like the X-Files of UFO reports, the strangest of the strangest. And also I was on the Mars project at MUFON, where we're archiving all old reports that were on paper and newspaper articles. And that's pretty much where I am now. My current duties include overseeing all of the field investigators outside the United States. And I'm also involved at the symposium in Denver this coming July, where I'll be giving a Cases of Interest for 2021 presentation, the most intense cases of this past year that just ended. And that's pretty much where I am now.
Excellent. So, I mean, fair to say you've witnessed a couple things, more than I have. And I'm sure you get tremendous cases in. You hear from a lot of people.
Oh, I do something on the order of like 150 cases a year. And when we do the Cases of Interest presentation, I look through approximately 5,000 cases a year, looking for the 10 best.
You know, speaking earlier about the orbs, I'm starting to evolve in theory with those. I'm under the impression that it seems to be they go ahead of actual ships, right? So like a recon. And so when they move as fantastic as they do, there's probably little to no threat of any harm for an occupant, right? And that's why, and I see parallels with the orbs in the paranormal and ufology. I'd had this discussion with a couple people. I mean, try to imagine higher intelligence is watching us, right? We're under surveillance.
Oh, I believe, yes, that we're being visited by who or what. I always am open-minded to,
right?
With ufology and with orbs specifically. I don't believe that orbs are one phenomenon. I believe it's several. Okay, and there are orbs that are simply natural phenomena, like ball lightning,
right.
Which I believe some people come in contact with. There are also orbs that manifest into humanoids. Are you familiar with Albert Rosales, who wrote the Humanoid series of books, The Others Among Us?
I'm actually not.
15 books of covering 2,000 years of humanoid sightings. A fascinating set of books. In his books, there are numerous accounts of orbs turning into entities, orbs that have faces. In other accounts, orbs seem to be intelligent, where a human being witness will scream, they'll back away. People have tried to chase them, but they never catch up. When you surround an orb, it will go up. So it seems to have at least a rudimentary intelligence. Now, to get to your point, are they associated with other UFOs? And it's a resounding yes. I have numerous accounts of orbs and discs, orbs and triangles, orbs and cigars. In the early 40s, it was discs with orbs. In the 50s and 60s, it was cylinders, and today it's triangles. So yes, they sometimes precede a nuts and bolts type craft sighting, and sometimes they are actually trailing behind the craft. Numerous times, especially in the 50s and 60s, cylinders, which a lot of people consider motherships, were seen releasing orbs or orbs going to it, including military officers. So yes, there is definitely a connection between nuts and bolts crafts and orbs, as if they are some kind of reconnaissance vehicle. There's also a subcategory of helicopters, like black helicopters chasing orbs, whether they're together or whether they're the ones being pursued by the other. We don't have enough data on it, but there are numerous accounts in the MUFON database of black helicopters chasing orbs.
Yeah, consider what an orb is. It's again, I say this, I always compare things to our military applications. What would we do in modern times currently when we want to go into an area and we know there's hostiles there? We send out recon in the form of drones or satellite. And so when you consider what an orb is, it's basically pure energy. So can it alter its state? Sure, I would think so. Another big thing too, and I'm glad you touched on it too, about the cylindrical ones, the Tic Tacs and the cigar shapes. As I've been learning, this has been spoken about for a very long time, long before the Nimitz, the Navy incident, right? And so much so that even the Russians 30 years ago were making claims of this. And it's only that in recent times that we had the videos released, which, by the way, is what got me in all the way on the podcast and learning more about this. I think that's, these objects, like our cars, there's our vans, there's our cars, there's our trucks and buses. They have their own, each one has their own purpose. They're designed for that purpose. And like us, their technology advances as time goes on. So that, they get the brand new 2021 models, etc. And I always make room for the idea of, like, with the orbs, especially in parallels with the paranormal. Whenever they're going to study something, what best to do to send something out there and qualify what it is they're looking at?
That's a really good question, and I could only give you hypothetical answers. The energy orbs, I perceive as being curious. Okay. I also perceive them as being a reconnaissance type of vehicle. If you're familiar with the earthquakes and with nuclear reactor meltdowns, you tend to see orbs around these disaster areas. In some cases, with an earthquake, for example, it may be earth lights, just a natural phenomenon. But in cases where you have like a nuclear meltdown, orbs are frequently seen. Orbs are seen over battlefields. It was a big thing in the Vietnam War. Orbs have been seen at sea, coming in and out of the sea. Do they go to some sort of underwater base? Why does water not extinguish them? There's also in Wales in 1905, there was a religious aspect to it where orbs were following this one particular lady who was leading a church revival in Wales. But there's also another theory that was put forth by a fellow named Ted Rowe. Ted Rowe has an organization called NARCAP, N-A-R-C-A-P, and he investigates collisions and near collisions of aerial objects with airplanes and helicopters and such. And in 2019, we had a really interesting case. It was the case of the year in 2019 of a FedEx pilot flying over Mexico who was accosted by an orb. And it stayed with the aircraft for 33 minutes. And not only did this guy report it, this pilot, but he had the wherewithal to actually film it. And he filmed it out the cockpit window, and then he panned down to his TCAS radar, which is their anti-collision radar, and there was absolutely nothing on it. When they reached the United States border, they were headed to Tennessee, the orb shot off to the west and would not cross over into the United States. That's something that natural phenomena wouldn't do. So his theory was that sometimes the plasma ball may not be pure energy. It may be concealing a sphere inside it, some sort of technological object. Why would it clothe itself in a plasma field around it? Well, it turns out that plasma absorbs radar signals, which is why it didn't show up on the TCAS. If an F-35 is flying into Iran and they put their radar up there, the F-35s now have the ability to shoot out a plasma field in front of the jet so that the radar signal will be absorbed and not bounce back to the ground radar. Ted Rowe's theory is that that's what this craft was doing, but that it may not have been as sophisticated as it would have liked to be because it wouldn't cross the border into the United States for some reason. So are they all plasma balls, or are some physical objects concealed within plasma balls? And if so, what was so interesting on that FedEx plane that this object pursued it for 33 minutes?
That's a great question. You know, when I hear about the UFOs lighting up and the plasma balls, and the first thing in my mind is when you're using some form of technology you're able to manipulate space differently and to travel, the air and molecules around it have different reactions, which would light up, right? It's heating it in a sense.
Definitely, yes. That's part of the reason why some of these objects create plasma fields. They ionize the air around it. Right.
So in the case of them following that FedEx thing, that has my interest. Now, is that the one where he was flying out of from Australia?
No, they were flying from Mexico City, allegedly with auto parts, flying to Tennessee. It's a very, very famous case. If your listeners just go on YouTube and look up FedEx Mexico UFO 2019, you'll get like several different versions of that video. It's a fascinating video. You hear the talking. And when he pans down to the radar console, it just proves that this is a legitimate UFO outside the guy's window.
Yes, I'm going to have to look into that. That's got my full interest. So,
it was March of 2019. March 2019.
So, I mean, look, when I started this podcast, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to go too deep. I wasn't going to learn too much about the guests until I had them on, so I could have more of an organic learning, Mm-hmm. And I'm liking it so far, because even meeting you and meeting other people, I'm learning more. What's going to pique my interest on that particular one is it not crossing the border. That's really
it's fascinating, because if it was a technological object capable of being invisible to radar, you would think it wouldn't care about going over the border. But where it went over the border was near, I forget, there's a military base there. So I think it intentionally wanted to avoid a military base near the Mexican-U.S. border in Texas.
You know what else has got me? I always think in theory and imagination, but here's an idea, right? Now imagine, again, my personal belief system is that we are the National Geographic Channel for higher intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. We're definitely under observation, no question. Because if people ask, like, well, what if they attack? I think they would have done it a long time ago, long before we had nukes. But when I hear about it not crossing the border, it makes me wonder, like, you know how like networks are like, well, this is where we're recording, you can't record there. I wonder if they have, like, maybe they have sections like that.
That's a very interesting possibility. Yeah, maybe that was the end of his surveillance area. Yeah, right.
I mean, that's his jurisdiction. That's it. You're done. They're in the U.S. now. It's this group of people, and this we monitor this. Right. Uh-huh. This is where we record our National Geographics. I said this to a lot of people. I'll draw from you on it. We're in a park, big park. You and I are walking. We see an ant mound. And in this ant mound, you see them driving combustion engine cars. They're flying planes. They have little wars. We would lock that park off and watch the evolution of that species pretty much indefinitely, as long as possible anyway. And it wouldn't be till they started using powerful weapons, say per se nukes, is when we would want to monitor their military facilities and their energy facilities up close.
Well, sure. I mean, you have the South Dakota incident in the 1960s where they shut down our missiles, and you have at Rendlesham in the 80s, they also shot a laser beam down at several of the missiles in the silos, shutting them off. So they do seem to have the capability of neutralizing our weapons. Another interesting thing is if you go back in time to the 1920s, Charles Fort, the original Fortean researcher who investigated all sorts of, rains of fish falling from the sky. He detailed triangle reports back in the 1890s. His belief was that we are someone's property. That's his most famous quote. We are someone's property. We are like possibly a zoo or an experiment, and we are being watched to see how we develop over the centuries. Another interesting thing is there are so many different types of UFOs. This, like you were saying before about trucks and cars and buses and different models of trucks. I truly believe that whoever is surveilling us does not want to invade us, first of all, but there may be more than one civilization coming to visit us, and maybe some of them are from another planet, another star system, another galaxy. Some of them, I think, may be time travelers. Some of them may be interdimensional. And there's also, I believe, the theory that there is a civilization paralleling us under the sea. And if that's true, I think sooner or later we're going to discover them, because with the disappearance of Flight 370 several years ago, we began mapping the entire ocean bottom because it's so vastly underexplored. So if there is a civilization under the water, I think that within 20 years, we will probably discover it.
I think sooner than that. Now that we're trying to build underground railways, you got the billionaires that are like, they want to make you maneuver between, major cities a lot faster. I think that's coming sooner than we think.
Yep.
To earlier to the point about the many species. So here's my thought on that. I think so. My theory on the gray aliens, the smaller ones, that they're an advanced biomechanical robot with a consciousness upload and or some sort of advanced AI. And I think the beings themselves that created these utilize them because, again, we don't know if they could breathe our air. We don't know if they could get sick here. I mean, that's what we would do as humans. I always try to revert to what humans would do. What would I do? And I would definitely want a bipedal robot that can maneuver around and study freely, right? Because it would definitely beat the rovers we have on Mars. Now, that being said, let's say they have this race, they found Earth, there's life here, like, wow, let's watch these guys. They're a little crazy, but we're going to watch them. It doesn't mean that other species don't communicate with that first species, and they kind of like delegate different projects to them. Or give them permissions of what they could do, because at the end of the day, their attitude is going to be, well, don't harm our project, right? I think their only motivation for preventing us from destroying this planet is not because they're a loving, caring species. We're the petri dish, and it's important that they study us long term for whatever reason it may be. But I think that's their motivation, to preserve the planet only so they could study us. I want to set aside the idea from people like love and happiness. You're talking about sophisticated, intelligent beings who recognize each other as a species. I assure you, for that kind of intelligence to travel the vastness of space or even in portals, they've eliminated race. They've eliminated religions if they ever had it. None of those dividing factors exist amongst them in order to do what they're doing. Now, the other races that people speak about, I think they get contracted or they get rights for them to come here and make the same observations.
Yes, I totally agree with you. The Greys have been described as being soulless. In many UFO reports, they don't seem to eat or drink anything. So I believe that they are some sort of hybrid type of machine or bio machine, sort of like the Borg in Star Trek. What's interesting is that a lot of times with the abduction scenarios, they don't harm somebody, or they will say, we're not going to hurt you, but they'll do painful things to people. And I'm always curious about that if they are an advanced species from another world, 10,000 years ahead of us, why would they use a method of testing us or experimenting on us where we would even know it, never mind making it hurt? The other interesting thing about Greys is that, again, in this humanoid series of books by Albert Rosales, they're frequently seen working together with the tall Nordics. And the tall Nordics, of course, the blonde-haired, Swedish-looking people that are always wearing a blue or silver jumpsuit. So it seems that there may be species cooperating with each other, or if these Greys are indeed biomechanical, they may be subservient to the Nordics. But Greys have also been seen with lizard-type entities, with mantis-type entities. So to your point, yes, I believe that maybe a lot of these species are interacting like possibly in some sort of alliance to study Earth.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the Greys are for what they are. I mean, again, I don't speak from science. This is my curiosity from childhood. My imagination gets a hold of it, and then whatever I could read thereafter. And if you look at the size of their head, people are like, well, why are their heads so big? And it's a computer. An advanced computer. The eyes are big and black because there's sensors, cameras, et cetera, et cetera. And sure, they would rent those out to other species. Like, you want to go out there and examine Earth? Well, don't interfere with them. We'll rent you here's your craft with your Greys. Go do your studies. And here's the guidelines and the rules of what you can or cannot do down there, right?
I never even thought of that. That's a great theory. That is a really great theory that they rented out to different races. Yes, I do want to say that one of the theories about why their eyes are so big is that they what's the name of the star? It's the Alpha Centauri binary star system. It has a red dwarf, that they possibly might come from a low light world and need larger eyes to be able to gather enough light. But that's just a theory.
Well, I mean, here's what gives your theory a little weight. The larger ones that are actually biological, sure. The smaller ones that are mechanical, well, we're going to make it in their image, right? I mean, they're just making it from what they know best.
Right. And another interesting thing is that the majority of reports of entities seen with UFOs, they are to some extent anthropomorphic, just like us. One head, two arms and hands, two legs. Now, does that mean that they have some sort of genetic connection to us, or is there some sort of universal law that throughout the universe, nature makes creatures that have two arms and two legs in the majority of time when those creatures are of an intelligent species? It's a fascinating question.
I'll tell you, I got an answer, or at least my answer. It's my theory. So anyone listening, this isn't science. You're not going to read this anywhere. But when you look at the cosmic web, and I think the cosmic web holds a lot for the paranormal, for everything, for life, period, right?
Mm-hmm.
it appears to me like the cosmic web is fiber optic cables that connects everything and everywhere at every point. And there's definitely some sort of architect. The similarities between the cosmic web, the way the brain looks, a spider web, the leaf, the way that the veins run in your body. There's a lot of similarities in all of it, parallels across the board. Now, if there's an architect, if there's a main source of creation, why break? If it's not broken, don't fix it. Two legs and two arms and a head to hold the computer. You know what I mean? If it works well here, why not everywhere?
Right. I totally agree. And to your point about the universe looking like a brain, when I saw the first cosmic thread photographs that they pieced together to show what the universe looks like in its entirety, to me, it did look like neurons firing in a giant brain.
Yeah.
So I do believe that everything in the universe is connected. There's the holographic theory of the universe that contained within every molecule in the universe is a mirror image of the entire universe itself, which is also another fascinating idea. Then there's the multiverse. Cosmology just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider this again, back to what I was talking about, the connections of the cosmic web and how it looks like there's fiber optic cables. If you get a higher intelligence to figure out how to utilize that for both travel and communication, you're talking about instantly tapping to another portion of the galaxy. Right? I mean, to harness it, and I'm going to say this for people, in order for those feats to be met, you have to be beyond yourself as a species. You have to be, you can't worry about your color difference and your race and your religion. That I promise you, other species that are observing us, they don't care about that nonsense. They're here for the science and the long term of the science. Now, that doesn't mean, and here's something I believe, because of this James Webb telescope that's up now, I think
I can't wait.
I'm excited. I think we start finding planets that have ozones and they have atmospheres. And here's a reality check for us. Most of those planets, why they're not reaching out, why there's no beacon of energy coming across, is because they're still in their primitive state. There's the Bronze Age, Stone Age. They might just be in the 80s somewhere where they are. And their transmissions aren't going to reach here for who knows how long, because that's radio. It's not as instant as using, per se, the fiber optics of the cosmic web. And if we found them, what would we do? Well, we would study them, and we would not want to interrupt their natural environment.
Well, I think in a quiet type of way, that's what NASA is doing. I truly believe that we want to see if we can find them before they find us, because we've been shooting out radio and TV signals now for 70, 80 years. So they're just reaching the nearest stars now. The idea of the James Webb being able to see into the atmosphere of an exoplanet and to say, whoa, there's pollution on that planet, that means that there's a civilization there, I think would be very much to our advantage to know that.
Right.
And why does it seem like we're so alone? The Drake equation and stuff, the Fermi paradox. A lot of these civilizations may have destroyed themselves before they were able to leave their world. That's another thing, that we're at the cusp of expanding out into the universe now, and hopefully we won't destroy ourselves before we cross that threshold.
Well, that's why we got Elon send us over to Mars, because unfortunately here on Earth, it's when you look just on the news and you look at social media, well, what the hell's wrong with us, man? How I say this and I reiterate it so many times, I apologize, but how the hell are we still racist? It blows me away. How's that possible? You know, our technology is leapfrogging our bio life forms, right? And
it's ahead of our ability to control it. I know that for sure.
Yeah, eventually Neuralink's going to come into factor, and that's the design behind Neuralink is to be corrective for like strokes and other cognitive issues. But eventually it'll be used where we could communicate with one another without words. And now, eventually, when we do that, these other races that are observing us, now we're on a timer, right? Because they're like, all right, now they're doing this, and it's at some point when everyone's connected mentally, and you have this greater understanding, eventually the needs that we have currently aren't really going to matter much. That's another thing I was going to bring up. Are we ready as a species to be enlightened at that level? When I say enlightened, like existing at the conscious level, like I think some of these beings do. Because then you're removing your Nike shoes, your brand new phone. You're not on social anymore. There's no need for it. There's just an understanding common amongst the species. Are we ready for that? I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be very honest. I don't know if I'm ready to part with like my shoes or a shooting pool or experiencing a sunset. Because when you're existing at a vibration or a level like consciousness, those things you don't need anymore. They become useless to you. So I don't know. I wonder if we're ready for that.
I don't think we're ready for it, to be perfectly honest. I think if anything, we're going backwards. That's just my opinion. I think technology is actually making us lazier as a species. But I also think that if you look at the 1950s, when the government said, people can't handle UFOs, it will destroy religion, it will destroy civilization. That seems hokey to me today because we've become so much more savvy about what's going on in the world that I do think contact, we could handle it as a species. But as for us going vibrational, I still think that we're like 2 or 3 centuries removed from that still at this point.
I agree. I look, I admitted it myself. I'm not willing to trade. Like, look, I like wearing my shoes, shooting pool. And
right. Me too.
It's tough because you don't want to you want to learn more and you want that. For me personally, I would want to learn more. If aliens came to my house tonight, I'd be like, listen, I don't care what you probe away. That's fine. What do I get out of this? I want to learn something, make me smarter, make me taller. You know what I mean? I would definitely not panic. I'm not one of those, but humans as a whole, and I know people like this, and I'm not going to call anyone out, but there are people they're in their religion that they know, and if you bring the subject of UFOs to their attention, like, wow, it's not in the Bible. I'm like, what? Like, the military released these videos. For me, that's the smoking gun. That something's flying around. I don't care what you believe, you can't deny. But there are people that it's just, if it's not written, it's not there. And I think there's a lot of gross and misinterpretations of the Bible, by the way. Not to mention how many times that literature has been, changed multiple times over years. So to see fit by leaders anyhow. So what concerns me is if you take these people that believe that way and you introduce a new race to the world, to the existence, what stops that guy from saying, well, you know what? I never liked the neighbor. I'm going to kill him. If there's, what if they just snap? And that's what bothers me, because I see how people behave on lesser things. It's a scary concept to think people need some sort of fear to keep themselves on the straight and narrow. That scares me.
Right. I have conversations with people all the time. I believe in God personally, but and there are a lot of ufologists that actually do. But when I try to speak to like a certain type of Christian, for example, they're in total denial. And I will show them, look at this video, look at what's going on with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand doing a UFO office. If it was just demons, the United States government wouldn't be given a hoot about it. So the United States government must know that something's going on. To what extent they think we're ready for it, I don't know. I think they don't think we're ready for it, and they want to give it to us in little pieces through media, through movies, by finding microbes on Mars next year. Oh, so life does exist off planet Earth, but they're not ready to tell us that the Nordics and the Greys are visiting us. I personally think we could handle it. Yeah.
See, me, I believe in God. I just don't think the word's God. I think architect.
That's a good way, or overruling supreme intelligence.
Yeah, when you see the construct of space and everything, cosmic web and other planets, and there's no doubt that there's some sort of architect behind it. No matter how and when God said to people, like, I'm going to make them in my image, you could be just speaking, hey, it's not broken. We're not going to fix it, right? It's the head, the arms, bipedal, Right. It just seems to work really well with an intelligence. And then there's the other atoms, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but what I can say, and if it were demons, I think we'd be consulting the Vatican, right? Like, hey, listen, this is what's going on. Not to mention also this planet's 4 billion old, 4 billion years old, give or take. Who knows what's lived here prior? So It's really hard to say religion is the undoing of it all. We should just, at some point, we got to realize we're a species. Now, why are they spoon feeding us these disclosures more and more closely together? Let's look what's going on. Private industry is going to space now, a lot, and
right.
And I said this before in another podcast, but you get like Jeff Bezos up there, and some of the people he's bringing up, and they catch footage. You think they're suppressing that? You think to them that's likes, that's viral. They're not suppressing that. So I think I think the process has to speed up. I think with the advent of new technology that just the civilian world could utilize, we're up against it. We kind of have to, especially now, again, saying like we come with Neuralink. Imagine like what we're going to be able to do with vision in corrective surgeries. And now we have a lot of people that are studying space, in the private sector, and they have money to spare. And when they start seeing things, you can't suppress all of it. It's not possible. So I think I think the spoon's feeding starting to speed up a little bit, personally.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you think of the internet, half of it's bad, the other half's good. The internet can, break people into small self-serving groups, but yet the internet can force change by showing truth. If people are posting stuff that is irrefutable proof, videos and such, like we have with that FedEx plane case, you can't hide that forever, especially now that everyone's walking around with an iPhone. All right. It's not 70 years ago. Anybody, any day can capture something. And our physicists are at a point now where for decades we used to think nobody's coming from another planet, they're too far away. Well, there's physicists in the United States, Eric Davis for one, who writes white papers on how you can bend space and time so that you can theoretically go from one planet to another in 2 seconds. So the distance thing falls apart. But I've just lost my train of thought, so you continue, please.
Yeah. Listen, to couple points to this. One, what you said earlier about the internet being good or bad, I agree.
Yes.
I'll tell you why I agree, and especially in the world of ufology, it's kind of a dangerous thing to do is to theorize on someone's speech, because you don't, even though he's addressed it later. But Ronald Reagan once said, how would our differences be separate with the threat of an alien or under threat of an alien invasion, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think he meant that as like, I know something and they're coming. That I promise you, that's not what happened. He said these things because at that time, in that era, alien movies were very popular, and aliens were very negative in that era. And he wanted to get a message out there. Now, what happens from that is people took their own, what they could take from it. They're like, well, he knows something. Why would he say that? Right. But then there's the other group that are like, well, I understand what he means by that. We should be more together because what if? Now, that's one point to it. The other big thing for me in the ufology currently is people, they cast these doubts, and I don't think you could do it anymore. You can't really point a finger at someone and call them crazy anymore. Again, after 2017, I don't give a shit who it is. You can't deny that now. That's the U.S. military's top imaging, seeing these objects. And when I remember I was in a pool hall when it got released, right? And I saw the video. I'm like, oh my God, I got to go home, because I was excited. I've always liked ufology and UFOs as a kid. And I lost it for a while, because I was like, well, I think by now they would have came here. And then that video came out. I was excited. And during the pandemic, what else was I going to do but research? And then as I started researching, I started finding out more and more information from different eras. And people say, well, this has changed, that's changed. But it's actually pretty consistent. If you read about, again, like some of these objects that are in the sky, whether they be triangular and or spherical or even a Tic Tac, that's been expressed for a long time. This isn't new. It's just the way we describe it is new because we didn't have IR cameras and fighter jets observing this. This is what we saw from the ground.
Yes, I'll tell you, I'm very much into patterns. One of the patterns that I investigate are screens in UFO reports. Prior to 1930, you will never find a UFO report where someone describes seeing a screen on a console on a UFO. And screens also people who have been abducted, for example, sometimes have to sit and watch a movie of Earth's destruction. So screens have become all over the place in UFO reports, but only since 1930, when there was a way to understand what a screen was at the beginning of television and movies. Before that, people had no concept how to describe things. So if you go back 500 years, nobody understands what an alien gray is. So they're not going to describe it as an alien gray. Jacques Vallée would say, they described it as leprechauns. So a lot of it has to do with patterns that people are becoming aware of as we move into a technological, post-technological age, really.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention it, how would you describe it, an object like that, per se, in the Egyptian times? You would have to compare it to what you know.
Right, exactly. Like the Tutmosis III sighting over Egypt, they called them the circles of fire. Was it an orb army? What's interesting is that they were dropping fish and other types of junk on top of the Egyptians, which I found fascinating. It was almost like they were flushing their toilet bowl with what they don't need after sucking up water someplace else. But yeah, primitive man doesn't have the words to describe an alien abduction. Women in the Middle Ages were being abducted left and right. I mean, there's so many accounts of it. People would see armies in the sky. In 2nd Maccabees, chapter 5, the opening sentence is about a sky battle. All right. Then you have the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, where there were obviously aircraft flying over it. You have Nuremberg, 1561, the aerial battle. But they don't know what's going on. We can perceive it that, well, maybe it's aliens, maybe it's time travelers, maybe it's interdimensional creatures. And we have the vocabulary today that they didn't have 500, 1,000 years ago.
Well, it's true. It's like Bob Lazar said, when they're trying to retro-engineer something, if our current technology can't do it, then put it on the shelf and let's come back when technology catches up.
Right. You mentioned triangles a little while ago. Triangles are very fond of shooting blue beams. And what I've discovered over the years is that blue beams from triangles have multiple purposes. They've taken out a radar station in Russia. They scan people. They seem to decontaminate people, because blue light, like we're using now on buses and trains with COVID, they may be decontaminating somebody before they suck them up into the ship. So there's a lot of patterns, as I mentioned before, but triangles, probably more than any other type of vehicle, fascinate me most, because they're so big, they're so quiet. They just hover over roads. All right. They've been associated with abductions. What are they doing? Is it all TR-3B American technology, or is there some other player that has a similar design that's not from Earth?
Yeah, it's definitely not ours. It's definitely not Russia. I say definitely not China, because if you have that kind of technology, you think China's going to be like, well, keep it a secret. In their eyes, what are they going to do about it? Yeah, we got it. So what? Guess we're the superpower now. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
I mean, that's, you're talking about a technology that we have nothing to rival it, not even close. So I definitely don't think it's ours. I do kind of believe the way you describe it, and the more I read about the triangles, they sound like the where most of the study happens, the local study anyway. That's the impression I get.
And they have an incredible ability to just, allow people to see them hovering over roads. It's like, if this was a top secret experiment of the United States, would we be letting these things fly over highways where so many people see them? Right,
no
right.
Way.
It's, you don't let your top secret stuff out of Area 51. Never mind a highway in, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Now, you got to keep in mind, too, advanced technology or not, like even the Phoenix Light incident, you got to imagine at some level, something atmospheric could disturb it, or maybe we're seeing it, not because they want us to. There's something abnormal happening. I mean, how do you know they're not up in that ship? And they're like, oh my, are they looking at us? Oh, damn it. Like, how do we know an accident didn't happen? Or, people ask too, like, well, if they're so advanced, why would they crash? Like, think what lightning is. It's extraordinary power harnessed by in our atmosphere, right? We don't even know how to control it still, So I don't know. When I hear about it being seen by people, I don't believe the big percentage of that is intentional. I think something may have happened, or they thought they were cloaked, and who knows? But
yes, I agree with you. For example, Roswell, there's a theory that we were just beginning to use radar on a mass scale at our military bases, and that maybe these Roswell fellows crashed because their vehicle got caught in a radar beam and they weren't ready for it and it went down. Another one that comes to mind is, what was the name of that submarine, the U.S. submarine, the Topang? Where they actually, through the periscope, filmed a large cylindrical object that seemed to be on fire crash into the ocean. So I agree with you. I think that these folks, whoever they are, and they're probably from more than one place, these entities, their technology is way ahead of ours. But do I think they're perfect? No. I think they make mistakes in some of these UFO reports, and I also think that their craft sometimes malfunction, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the crashes by themselves too. I kind of did some research on it. The majority of them, there's always some storm off in the distance. Now, just because it crashed in Roswell doesn't mean that it didn't malfunction in Roswell. It could have been hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away, and then that just happens to be the site. Abnormalities happen in the atmosphere all the time. So like you said, they're not perfect. Mistakes could be made. The other big part of it for me, and I still don't know how to approach it, but with the bodies recovered from the Roswell, and by description, it still sounds synthetic to me, right? So that's what, that's one of the stronger things that gave me to the idea that these are biomechanical robots. I mean, if you look at a movie, Men in Black, for example, remember there's the little being inside the other guy's head?
Yep.
Things like that run in my head. Now, maybe not that way. When I say consciousness, there's right now, there's groups right now mapping the human brain with the intention of uploading and downloading our consciousness, which giving us I guess immortal. If that's the case, then there is no time constraint for their observation. It could be pretty indefinite. They don't really need to mingle with us. They don't really have a purpose to, anyhow. I don't know. So by hearing those bodies, as they seem synthetic, tells me one or two things. One, my theory is pretty strong, or maybe they're testing something out. Because again, their technology has to advance too.
Right. Uploading and downloading consciousness for immortality is a very scary concept for me, because there's always the possibility that you could be an immortal slave.
Yeah.
That's the way that's the greatest fear I have, is that you could be forever somebody's slave in a computer. All right. So I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but if the Nordics want to download stuff into the Greys' heads, that's fine with me.
Right. Yeah. Because imagine that you wake up one day and you're in a jar forever. Yeah. Forever.
There was a couple of 1960 science fiction movies like that. So yeah.
That freaked me out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That being said, that's our goal. We really want to, we're mapping the brain for that purpose.
It's coming. For sure. It's coming. For sure. I can't imagine. I have two 9-year-old kids, twins. I can't imagine what their world's going to be like when they're my age, 62. Oh. I couldn't even conceive what it's going to be like 60 years from now.
Read about what Neuralink's doing and the plan behind Neuralink, what the capabilities of that are. I don't think you're going to have to wait. I think within 5 years, we start seeing the outcome of that. I mean, as far as it being corrective for people that have had brain trauma, maybe another maybe less than 5 years after that, it's going to become applications for us to, communicate.
For sure. We're going to be putting our head at the scanner at Walmart. You know what I mean?
We're already there now with our phones. I mean, we're practically there. It's not internal. Now, here's another thing. And the gray alien's like, oh, well, they communicate using telepathy, even with us. Well, imagine if they have that many years on us. Their Bluetooth it's like 4 times better than any Bluetooth we'd ever made. And if you look how your brain's constructed, your brain it's almost like a transmitter, right? So that, of course they could put something in your head to make you hear it. If you ever have like ear water fluid in your ears and you just tap on the top of your head, you can hear it perfectly. So that's basically a sound vibration. So it's not impossible to figure out a way to use sound waves to communicate directly to you without moving the mouth or anything else.
I totally agree with you. I do not believe the human body ends at the skin line. I believe we are a sort of antenna. All right. I have had, I'd say in my life, 20 or 30 times where I picked up what somebody else was thinking, like 2-3 feet away from me. So I have always believed that. And if you look at the preponderance of how many humanoid encounters people have on a spaceship where they are spoken to telepathically, it goes beyond the pale that these people can't all be mad. We're talking literally tens of thousands of reports of telepathy.
Yeah.
Right. Over the past 100 years. I truly believe that whoever these entities are, wherever they come from, they are truly talking to these witnesses with telepathy. I believe it's a real phenomenon in these reports.
I do too. Listen, go underwater tomorrow and have your friend focus some sort of sound wave towards your direction. You're going to hear it. It's going to amplify. It's going to vibrate in your head. Your head. It's still like, again, when you look at the brain, it's literally right now. Amongst mankind, it is the most complex computer on Earth right now. Currently.
For sure.
And so that being said, when people are like calling people crazy, oh, telepathy, you're nuts. It's not supernatural. It just means that their technology is more advanced. They figured out. And it's not even that their technology is so advanced. We could do it if we applied ourselves to it. The question is, do we want to remove speech? Do we want to remove expression? Well, I don't know if we're ready for that. Scientists have to sit back and say, I don't know if people are ready for that yet. You know?
I believe that, whatever DARPA is doing now and the Chinese are trying to come up with a way to control brainwaves. I wouldn't be surprised if, Area 51 or DARPA to have something that we would think is science fiction for the next 100 years, and they already have it. And I think that intelligence agencies are geared towards trying to use technology like that. So, yeah, I believe that if we don't have it now, we're very close to having it ourselves, never mind aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like we do, because I used to watch a show called Future Weapons, and they had some pretty fantastic stuff on there. Sound waves that were rendering people unconscious, or if you amplified it even further, you could collapse their lungs, kill someone with it. So that show's greater than a decade old. Imagine now. And they took that show off the air for who knows why. But the point I make is, I think we have a lot of stuff that's Black Project, because the F-A-22 Raptor was being experimented with, I want to say late 80s. And then the F-117 and the B-2 bomber, that's experiment with, you're talking 50s, 60s, right? Because of the SR-71, they discovered from its profile, which their profile was intended to be, less for radar to pick up and faster and higher. But then I think they saw the real applications for that. So now take a race that's had, I don't know, let's say 10,000 years on us. Forget it. You guys can cast out all you want, but look, anyone that's going to cast out on another human for what they've experienced, take our technology now and just for 1 second use your imagination and think about 10 years from now.
Right. Don't they say that to some people it's magic, but to others it's just, future technology. Yeah,
man. I said this before. If you took a smartphone back to the 17th century, they'd shoot you dead. You're a witch.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
So, Bob, before we close, anything you want to add?
I just would like to put a little plug in for MUFON if I could. MUFON,
by all means.
MUFON is the largest civilian UFO organization in the world. We're probably the only one that's worth reporting to. Being a field investigator has been the most intriguing experience of my life. Some of the stories are mundane of the witnesses you interview, but some of them are so chilling that your hair stands up and you go, oh my God, these people experienced something beyond normal that I can't explain. MUFON is cutting edge. If anybody has a desire to be a field investigator, I guarantee you would love doing it. And I just wanted to thank you, Adam, for having me on. And, I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have you on again. We're going to definitely do. So the next time we're together, we're going to go over case studies.
I got a billion of them.
That's what I'm excited to hear, because that's what I want to hear. I've spoken to a lot of MUFON people on the show, like Douglas Wilson. I mean, the list is long. I respect MUFON immensely. Very diverse, very large group of like-minded people that make room to learn greater things, and they don't judge. That's the key element. They just take the information in, they absorb it. They're not going to judge you if you approach them with a case. They're like any of us, like how I want to be. You want to hear it, you want to filter to see what it is you can learn from it, and then you can apply it to your next experience.
And there's a lot to learn, And hopefully with AI coming online and being available to everybody within the next 10 years, we're going to be able to put patterns together that nobody ever thought about before.
I think you're right. I think you hit the head on the nail. I mean, now that you say that, yeah, I think AI, because they are definitely going to be able to recognize patterns that we as humans can't. I think that will uncover something. That's a good point.
For sure, it's going to uncover a lot. These 70 years of UFO reports that people say, oh, it's all subjective. Not with AI. You're going to be able to piece it all together.
Yeah. I mean, look, I hate to say this, but the best computers are beating people in chess. I mean, well, they've been doing that a long time. But their ability to figure out equations almost at a quantum level, I think we're going to find out a lot in the near future. Especially, we're not a complacent species when it comes to technology. So, well, sky's the limit, man.
Yep.
All right, Bob, it's been good talking to you. We're definitely going to do it again.
Adam, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Indeed, sir. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.